Well, all right then. Welcome back. Today I am continuing this sort of mini series, I guess, on the on my original Destiny story that I'm narrating. It's called Shadowlands, and it's based in the Destiny universe. If you don't know what that is, it's a popular video game with a lot of interesting lore, rich universe. And so this is the continuation of my story. Making his way down the marshland slopes, Zachariah began working out a plan in his head about what to ask and to whom to ask in regards to the strange happenings in the forest. As much as he wanted to rest and recharge, he needed to treat this as a fact-finding mission. There would be plenty of time for sleep and relaxation after this situation was addressed, and he knew he had to be the one to solve it. As he approached the outer boundaries of the town, the tall metal and wood wall loomed overhead. A faint glow of gold, red, and orange hues flickered across the very top, bathing the massive wall in flickering light. Zachariah's machine olfactory senses took in the scent of smoked meat, burning maple wood, and the thick, refreshing smell of moisture from the trees and grass as he reached for the lever on the outer door. Stepping through the threshold, he shut the door behind him and smiled as one of the town's elderly seamstresses passed him by. It felt good to be home for sure, but he had questions that needed answering. He quickly strode towards the town tavern, head covered and obscured by his hunter's hood. As he approached the tavern, he heard the unmistakable sounds of clattering glass, and obnoxious, loud, slurred shouts and quips from those who've had a few too many. Being the introvert that he was, Zach sighed and took a moment to brace himself for the intense social arena he was about to hurl himself into. Walking through the leather covering hanging over the front door, he entered the room, and all fell silent as the patrons stopped and stared at him. Some probably sizing him up, others with a more inquisitive glance, and still yet others with a gaze of amazement and wonder at the appearance of a guardian that was seldom seen yet heard about in these parts. Zachariah did live in this town, but only actually showed up once in a while. Zachariah took a deep breath, his blue optics scanning nervously across the room, finding a place to rest on a beautiful, long-haired brunette awoken female. As the various pungent aromas filled Zach's artificial olfactory senses, he noted that the bartender, a tall, black-haired human male with rugged features, had beckoned him to sit in an open table on the far side of the room, somewhat secluded from the throng of patrons, drunkenly shouting obscenities and nudging each other around. He scoffed a little. The bartender clearly knew the rumors surrounding hunter guardians from the tower to the north. Hunters don't really socialize well and often live as lone wolves, not answering to anyone or anything except the greater good of humanity and protecting its last bastions by seeking out the danger rather than letting the danger come to them. Sitting down at his designated table, back leaning against the worn leather cushion of the hardwood booth, he glanced across the busy tavern, scoffing at a few scenes he was witnessing. Two rugged-looking men, in what he assumed were their 40s, dressed in animal hides, were laughing loudly as they drank from their mugs and slammed them down on the small round table. Two human females sat together on a small table across the room, clearly swooning over the two obnoxious men. Another patron appeared slumped back in their booth, legs outstretched on a chair under their table, arms crossed and head obscured by a crude leather hood draped over their face. Zack guessed they were sleeping. As his gaze began to drift from the stranger he'd just been looking at, something shiny called his attention back to this individual. His glowing blue eyes zoomed in on the area where he saw the glint. There, on this person's leg, was a fine blade made of a red polished steel. The grip was wrapped with a black leather, and at the end of the tang was a circular ring that had a red tassel tied to the end of it. Something about this person seemed to pique his curiosity. He might have some answers for me, Zack thought to himself. A shadow blocked out the light from the ceiling lamps in the tavern, causing Zachariah to glance up. There, standing before him, was the purple-skinned, awoken woman he had noticed earlier when he had first entered the tavern. Her bright neon green glowing eyes peered down at him with a look of inquisitiveness, her dark black hair glittering under the dim blue glow of the bar's lights. She smiled at him slightly as she invited herself to the seat across from Zack. He followed her with his eyes, head tilted to one side as if to pose a "what can I help you with?" question. She raised her hand and nodded in the direction of the waitress, indicating she wanted a drink. Glancing up at Zack, she stared at him for what felt like a near century before she spoke. Seen a lot of folks come and go through here. Used to overhear conversations having to do with a supposed hunter guardian that watches over the town from a distance, who passes through like the shifting winds. I must say, I never actually believed the stories. Zack blinked at her, gliding his metallic fingertips across the wooden table. What makes you think I am a guardian? I could be a mercenary from out west, beyond the wall. She chuckled and shook her head. Come on. I see your cloak, the chest armor you're wearing, and the simple fact that you're an exo. Hunter guardians are known for their cloaks and withdrawn, often quiet personalities, and I read you like a book the moment you stepped in here. Zack let out a sigh. Apparently, at least to some, his occupation was known. So much for trying to play this underhandedly. My, what a pain. Guess I should get down to business then. My name is Zachariah 2. I'm here to see if anyone has heard anything regarding the forest just north of here beyond the hill. I suspect something dark has awoken in the ruins there. The female narrowed her eyes. The glow from her iris dimmed slightly. She peered around the room, clearly surprised and anxious by his declaration. Leaning forward, she said in a near whisper, How do you know those ruins? No one that's ever lived here less than 60 years would know those are there, much less the strangeness that hangs over the woods. How old are you? Just how long have you been present here in this town? Zack sighed. Well, that's where it gets a bit complicated. Suffice it to say, I wasn't always an exo. According to what my ghost was able to uncover, there was a time when I was human. Up until I was about 32, I think. In the room where I was resurrected, she was able to scan a nearby table that had some nonsensical writing on it, that when she pieced it together, revealed what appeared to be my story. All I know is that I started counting my age from the moment I became an exo. So I'm around 27 now. I guess you can think of it as a rebirth of sorts. The female awoke and let out a long sigh. Whew. Well, that's a typical story as far as guardians are concerned, I guess. Zack scoffed, leaned back against the booth, and kicked his feet up on the table. Reaching into his pocket, he produced an old, pre-Golden Age cigarette lighter he had found while scouting the remote lands east of the Cosmodrome in Old Russia. He thumbed at the igniter. Sparks danced out the end of it. As far as us exos are concerned, actually, from what I've been told, we were built by humans some hundreds of years ago in Earth's past for the purpose of war. But then the darkness came, and, well, everything went to hell, as you know. She stared at him with an expression of imminent inquiry. I've never actually seen an exo up close before. So, you're telling me that you all were essentially war machines that have somehow, had human consciousness implanted into you lot? He flicked his lighter again, leaning his head back slightly as he let out a sigh. His mechanical chest rising and falling, simulating human breath. That's the Cliff Notes version, but basically. Zack sat up, correcting his posture, and held a staunch gaze toward the tavern's window. The orange, flickering light from the ancient-style candle lamp on the table below it bathed the wall in a glow. He blinked, staring off into the ether, lost in the thoughts their present conversation had sparked. Something wrong? She asked. Thumbing the strap on his weapon holster, his leg bounced up and down, seemingly on its own accord. An anxiety trait, most likely a remnant from his life as a human ages ago. Zack glanced at her momentarily. See, as an exo, we were originally meant to be war machines, yes, according to journals that were found. But we apparently served another purpose as research into our field progressed. It was theorized by much higher minds than you or I that human consciousness could be mapped and inserted into these machines, thereby achieving immortality. But I'm troubled, to say the least. Well, why's that? She asked as she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, tilting her head slightly and letting an eyebrow raise as if she was deeply interested in the change of tone here. Zack dropped his head, resting his eyes on the cup in front of him. As a guardian, when we first become as we are now, we are gifted immeasurable power. We essentially become gods, able to affect the very space and reality around us. Nigh immortal, so long as our ghosts aren't destroyed. And yet, for all that, we are forbidden to seek out who we were prior. And it's as if we simply cannot remember, a sort of amnesia, if you will. So, you think there's some conspiracy behind the ghosts and enacting the traveler's will? Sounds like you doubt the light. He stopped, his leg twitching momentarily as he met her eyes. I suppose you can say that. Seems a little interesting, don't you think? That we can't recall who we were. And that's made even more complicated by the simple fact that when a human becomes an exo, as I said, we are basically starting fresh. I mean, starting fresh upon starting fresh. The only thing all of us have in common is an eerily similar dream of a stone crypt deep underground somewhere. Kind of seems like there's two bodies with a vested interest in human guardians or exo guardians and exos in general not remembering things. Almost like there's a purposeful block there. She took a sip of her drink and set the cup down gently. Well, whatever the case may be, you should be careful who you speak those words around. Still got some folks out there that are akin to the shadows of your type. She moved her eyes steadily across the room, nodding her head as if to say some individuals in here could be whom she's talking about. Zach glanced over his shoulder to the opposite end of the room. The stranger with the red knife was still sitting there, face shrouded by a weather-beaten coat. Shadows of Yore, huh? Now there's a group I haven't heard about in a long time, he thought to himself as he turned back around. The Shadows of Yore were a group of fanatical guardians that walked the path of darkness, named after Dredgen Yore, an infamous guardian who held the Thorn, a hand cannon twisted by darkness, which had the power to poison and drain the life out of those who felt its sting, as well as corrupt its user. Anyway, one other thing I wanted to know, she said, calling him back to the present. Oh, and what's that? That number at the end of your names. What's the significance of that? Zach looked at her, closing the lid of the lighter. It means how many times we've been rebooted. Rebooted? Yeah, like revived after we were killed. She leaned back, resting her hands at her sides. So, people like Cade 6. Good old Cade, the hunter vanguard with his wise-ass jokes and one-liners. Zach huffed slightly, as he wasn't surprised in the least that Cade was known, even in remote parts like this. Yes, he died 6 times. Myself, twice. Do you remember how? It wasn't something Guardians were supposed to remember. Part of being resurrected in the Traveler's Light was experiencing a degree of amnesia after being reborn. Some Guardians were able to recall brief images, momentary flashes of memories, as if a fog had just barely parted in the mind to reveal an alien truth of a past that most could not begin to fathom as being their own. When it comes to being killed in accidents or battle post-rebirth, Guardians can remember their deaths. I do. My ghost Nessa loves to heckle me about it still, but I'd rather not speak about it. The Awoken nodded and smiled while glancing toward the rest of the tavern, the glow of her eyes bathing her cheeks and nose bridge in a faint green. He had never noticed before, at least not really in a way that mattered, how beautiful their species were. As he silently scrutinized her form, he noted how the awoken purple and blue skin appeared to be semi-transparent, with what looked like some kind of light energy ebbing and flowing under the dermis, a likeness of a glowing smoke or vapor dancing across a lake. When Zack had first met Commander Zavala back at the tower after being reborn as a guardian, the rigid, stern, humorless, armor-clad Titan was the first Awoken he had ever seen, and had assumed all of them had the same skin color, or at least slight variations of the grayish-blue. Later, after his adventures had taken him to the mysterious reef, a collection of derelict starships and floating debris from an ancient war, and home to the Awoken, he realized how amazing they were. To his surprise, shades of purples, blues, pinks, even white were the skin colors of these people. But the one thing they shared was the strange, pulsing, and coalescing energy beneath the thin surface layer of their skin. Brilliant glowing eyes of different colors. He watched her run her hands through her velvet black hair, tying it in a ponytail. Hunters didn't usually have much interaction with other people, aside from the occasional bumping into another guardian or traveling back to the tower to consult with the Vanguard or Cryptarchs. Being a hunter mostly meant you lived a nomadic, solitary life, while still working for the interests and protection of the tower and humanity as a whole. There really wasn't much face-to-face with your protectees. She had suddenly turned to him and tilted her head to the side. A slight grin formed along her lips. Quickly, Zack diverted his gaze down to his gauntlet, fidgeting with one of the leather straps in a vain attempt to look busy, although he knew the moment had come and the embarrassment was here to stay. It was times like this he was thankful he was an Exo. Machines don't blush, but something told him she was able to see his tell. Maybe it was the blinking, or the painfully obvious sudden fidgeting with his gear after she caught him looking at her. Alright, well, thanks for sticking with me this long, if you did. I will be back again with the third part. And I'm looking forward to continuing this as much as I can. If you like this content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to my YouTube channel, Electric Panda 808, all one word. Or my SoundCloud. Follow me on my SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/The Unity Podcast. I will be posting this there too. Also, please follow me there and leave a like. This is something new. As you know, we're all working from home now. We're all trying various things, trying to be creative in various ways, and for me, I'm just trying to dip my feet in this realm, I guess. So, if you would follow and subscribe, that would mean the world to me. Again, this is my own original story. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks, and be safe, guys.